Greetings. Welcome back to CIBER Focus, your source for national business information. My name is Ryan Craven, and today our guest is Megan Wade once again. She is a cybersecurity professional working at Ernst and Young. She currently works in information protection and application security. She's also a ransomware research affiliate at the Ostrom Workshop for Cybersecurity and Internet Governance at Indiana University. Megan pioneered the first ransomware negotiation strategy titled Digital Hostages, Leveraging Ransomware Attacks in Cyberspace. In our last video, she talked a little bit about the cybersecurity implications of the Russian and Ukraine war. And today she's going to share a little bit more information about what that looks like on an individual level and some of the things that we can do to mitigate our own security risk and open up to other corporations. Megan, thanks for being here. All right, Megan, welcome back. And thanks again for the previous conversation. And I'm excited to talk a little bit more about kind of the day-to-day impact and what we all can kind of do to, be safe and do our part.
Happy to be back, Ryan.
So kind of bringing it back home, there was the Colonial Pipeline hack not too long ago. Man, kind of NotPetya and kind of how does that all work, and what do we need to know about it, and kind of what are the potential implications?
Right. So there's been essentially in 2021, we had this first attack, I would say, that was very noticeable for the average American, which was the Colonial Pipeline hack. And that was the hack on the payment system of Colonial Pipeline, which, supplied 45% of the gas on the East Coast. And so for what they did was, they shut down operations entirely. It's kind of what you do in a situation where you're not sure just how bad the attack is. You want to segment your network. Essentially, you want to cauterize the wound, so to say. So they just shut down operations entirely. And this, in essence, was like the largest cyber attack on oil infrastructure, in the history of the United States. So, and what happened with the Colonial Pipeline hack was, the CEO, Joseph, he came out and said, this is a very highly controversial decision, but we're going to go ahead and pay out the Bitcoin payment, which Darkside was demanding. And so what we're seeing really is with Darkside, they believe that they're Russian based, but they're not an affiliate of the Russian government. And so they're also utilizing ransomware as a service, which I briefly mentioned in the last talk. And this is essentially where it's, a malware developer charges a user fee for people who don't have the technical knowledge or skills to develop their own strain of ransomware. But let's say they can still, are capable of breaking into a victim's computer. They can send, phishing emails and get traction that way. So with the ransomware as a service model, there's technical support for the people who are doing the hacking. They help with negotiations with the targets and processing payments and how to pressurize the blackmail essentially. And so this is sort of what was going on. Darkside had deployed on the Colonial Pipeline hack, and it was another variant of ransomware as a service. And so what's very interesting about this, these platforms, quite frankly, is the barrier to becoming a cyber criminal becomes lower, right? Because now you don't need to be the highly technical malware developer. You can pay to use the malware. And so essentially one of my favorite quotes from he was a notorious hacker for 10 years and spent time in prison for hacking, but he said, quote, "Any doofus can be a cyber criminal now," which is, it's humorous in a way, but in other ways, it's the barrier level is going down, which is going to increase sort of the frequency that we're seeing ransomware attacks. We're going to see it getting into the hands of more and more sort of ransomware gangs. And so, with each of these different types of operations, there might be, different threat information that you can collect. So like there's certain tactics, techniques, and procedures, what we call TTPs, which describe the behavior of an actor. So this could be, of the variant, it could be the order of operations on how they execute the attack. It could be the attack tool itself or the delivery mechanism. So like a phishing attack or, via a, vulnerability. And so in essence, that's what's happening back home as well.
Oh, that's wild. And it makes a certain amount of sense when you think about, for me, it comes down to kind of the prolific ability to share information and access so easily, right? And so it's, if you've got a basic skill set and can get put in touch with somebody that has what you need to be more malicious or to kind of move on to the next scale. And kind of the wild thing, I guess I didn't even think about is if, as an individual, like I don't have the money to buy a specific form of malware, but the provider, like you said, it can almost be a subscription fee. It can be
Yeah.
Hey, that's fine. You don't need to pay for it. But once you get in and access, and we'll take whatever percentage of, the ransom that you get paid. So it's wild that that's the direction that everything is going, but also
Right.
makes a certain amount of sense because that's just kind of how the economies and services work in general.
Right. It's just kind of funny because it's like you think about like Microsoft 360, right? It's like a subscription based service, but for ransomware. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So yeah, that kind of being the case, what can we do to kind of be a little bit more aware and diligent and not being the one ultimately responsible for causing a Colonial Pipeline hack or potential damages for either individual or the organizations that we're involved in and work for.
Right. So it's a complicated and somewhat easy answer, right? But not easy by any means. So in this current environment, recently CISA, which is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, they launched this Shields Up campaign earlier in this year, and that in essence is supposed to help individuals and organizations defend against cyber intrusions, which was, the campaign started in response to the war with Russia and Ukraine. There's some debate that maybe this is just the new norm. Shields Up is going to be a constant for any sort of, government, private business, hospitals, educational institutions. That's just going to be the order of operations now. So it's, we're taking into consideration the risk that we're facing, particularly in critical infrastructure and with these other institutions. So what CISA has recommended, to different corporate leaders is like lowering the reporting threshold. So we talked a little bit about the relationship, right, between private companies and the government. And so there's a lot to be said about, reporting cyber incidents and sharing that with the government, who then, kind of collects, any of these indicators of malicious cyber activity and allows, sort of almost like a database, right, of ways other people can, things to look out for, and things like that. So they also recommend, testing your incident response plans, running tabletops, which is sort of like a gaming exercise of like playing out a cyber attack in real time. Only it's not actually happening. It's just a tabletop exercise, right? And focusing in on maintaining business continuity. So, investing in security and resilience so that critical business functions can still operate if you're hit with the cyber attack. So then that brings us down even further. So that's, company, nonprofit, entity level, but just at the very basic level, practicing and cyber hygiene, for example, with your employees. Like 90% of successful cyber attacks begin with a phishing email. and you're aware of these. Have you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, working for IU, right? We've got a pretty robust, IT department and behind all our base layer security and stuff. So I think a lot of it probably gets filtered out. But I mean, almost weekly, we either see an email or, we get an email from the IT department like, hey, this is a phishing attempt that's going around that the dean of the business school is emailing you to ask for your cell phone number. And so just like spam calls anymore, it's almost that prolific, it seems like.
Right. And they're getting more and more sophisticated too. I feel like at the beginning you would see one and it was like very obvious, the who it was from was something you didn't have any idea, you didn't recognize, but now it's like mirroring so close to, sometimes they'll even have like a logo of like a company, and so, the attack profile of that vector is becoming more and more sophisticated. And we're also seeing like business email compromise, so like back attacks on the rise, where it's just simply an attacker infiltrating corporate email accounts, and using that access to create fake invoices or payments, into wiring money to cyber criminals as well. So
yeah, it's kind of gone from hey, here's a Nigerian prince that needs your help, to hey, this is Tony over in IT and we need to click this link so we can perform the security check. And
right.
Oh man, and we had talked about it a little bit, even with like social media, right? And the playing on emotions and building on emotions and behavioral attacks, and the next level of sophistication, right, is kind of playing along that lines too.
Social engineering, right? So it's quite, I wouldn't say it's quite easy now, but it's much easier thanks to social media to sort of single out maybe an employee, maybe somebody who's starting somewhere new, and then do a spear phishing attack, but maybe in real time, like you gain information that's publicly available about them, and you use that to leverage them into giving you their credentials to their network or any of their passwords to their email.
Yeah, it's wild. And like you said, kind of at the end of the day, it's not everybody has an IT department or
right.
Knows necessarily how to respond. And that age old, well, if you're not sure, don't click the thing. But it's becoming harder and harder to know if that's legitimate or not.
Yeah, and it doesn't always work. And with even with my own mother, like she'll send me a picture of an email she got and she goes, this looks suspicious, and then I'm like, absolutely do not click that, and then she's like, too late. So it's like the mind of humans, I mean, we're flawed, and as long as we have end users, we'll always need security. So.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a fantastic point to end on. So thanks again for the conversation and kind of walking us through the cybersecurity conversation on a global scale, the evolution of kind of the warfare, and how a lot of it can also just ultimately end up in the individual users. And maybe don't click that link.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
Take care. That's it for this edition of Cyber Focus. For future topics or suggestions, please drop us a line at cyber@indiana.edu.